In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Please be seated. Jesus said, "Where I am going, you cannot come. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." You know, it's kind of hard to follow the news lately and believe that this is really what's being followed by people who are disciples of Jesus Christ. Just to remind us of a few things, a number of states, including our own, have passed extremely restrictive bills concerning termination of pregnancy, aka abortion, that they don't take anyone's situation into account, simply decree what will be or will not be, with extreme punishment if not followed. There's an article in Sojourners magazine this week that I got that points out that the way we've set up the southern border is intentionally determined to funnel people trying to come over without going through a normal checkpoint, i.e. sneak in, funnel them into the Sonoran Desert where they're likely to die. In the last couple of years, there's been hundreds of deaths of people trying to enter the country. And yet, we also hear in the news, if people try to go out there from this side of the border and leave water and other things that might help people survive, they are arrested and charged with a crime, intentionally set up to kill people. And then, of course, we can talk about saber rattling of war. We can talk about all kinds of things that we hear near and far. How did this come to be, that so much cruelty and violence are being done and then often claimed in the name of Christ, or at least as a follower of him? As we know, in the Episcopal Church, we've been talking a lot lately about a theology of the way of love, living in love as this commandment, the only new commandment Jesus left, instructs us to be. But there is another theology that's been out there and has gained a lot of prominence lately. You may have heard about it, you may not. It's called dominion theology. And dominion theology believes that God has chosen in advance who should be in charge and who shouldn't. And that once God puts either a person or people or a group in charge, whatever they do is God's will and must be obeyed. Now, it's been pulled from pieces in mostly the Old Testament, starting with Genesis, where God gives Adam and Eve dominion. But it's also it's pulled from little places here or there, despite the fact that the predominance of the scriptures, and certainly of the New Testament, is about love and diaconal service and mercy and grace. This has been popular. Now, it's not a new idea, strangely enough. The term dominion theology is new, but 400 years ago it was being hotly debated, and it was called the divine right of kings. It's the exact same theology. It explains one of the great mysteries to me, which is why we could have someone in top authority in this country who behaves poorly, who breaks almost every rule of decorum, and certainly commits what scriptures and everything else calls sins, and yet it's fine. And you'll hear followers say, God has chosen this person to be president, therefore anything he does is God's will. Now that is probably the most extreme example, but dominion theology is rooted in our need for security and authority. It is advanced whenever our anxiety and fear grow. And all of us are susceptible to it from time to time. When whenever we're in a situation and we don't know what to do, there's always this one little voice that says, resort to violence, do something cruel. That'll fix the problem. This has been around for a long time. So there's no really solution that way. I think the funniest example of that I heard from my good friend Pancho in New York this week. He was at the cigar shop, and he said some guy came in, and he was all excited. He said, we're going to go to war with Iran. Boy, that's going to be great. We're going to go in there and whoop their asses. Now, you have to know Pancho, he left the Marine Corps a long time ago, but as you know, once a Marine, always a Marine. And of course, the rest of Pancho's career has been in disaster areas, largely cleaning up from wars. So picture this. Pancho reaches in his back pocket, pulls out his ball cap that says USMC on the top, puts it on his head, gives the man a withering stare, and says, then I expect you to be in the front line of the first wave going in. Yeah. It's in us. It's not just that we've picked one or two bad leaders. But there is the alternative that is still before us, the way of love. You know, one of the interesting items that just came out in the news this week or last week was that Bishop Curry's sermon at the royal wedding a couple of years or last year was given an award, I think, as the best public speech of the year. And I want to remind you of some stuff in there that he said. He said, ultimately, the source of love is God himself, the source of all in our life. There's a medieval poem. It's actually in Latin, ubi caritas. We have a couple of hymn versions of it. It says, where true love is found, God himself is there. And in 1 John, beloved, let us love one another because love is of God. Those who are born of God and know God. Those who do not love do not know God. Because, why? Because God is love. It's so easy when we're under stress to try to rely on things that we can control, that we can somehow overwhelm by might or violence or whatever. It's harder to respond in love every time something comes up. Yet when I see all these headlines, I keep saying, is that the most loving way to respond to this problem? We have to start with ourselves by imagining the world as it could be, as a world that lives out God's call to sacrificial love, God's call to love one another unreservedly. Listen to Bishop Curry again. If you don't believe me, just stop and imagine, he says. Think and imagine a world where love is the way. Imagine our homes and families where love is the way. Imagine neighborhoods and communities where love is the way. Imagine this tired old world where love is the way. When love is the way, unselfish, sacrificial redemption. Where love is the way, then no child will go to bed hungry in this world ever again. When love is the way, we will let justice roll down like a mighty stream and righteousness like an ever-flowing brook. When love is the way, poverty will become history. When love is the way, the earth will be a sanctuary. When love is the way, we will lay down our swords and shields down by the riverside to study war no more. When love is the way, there's plenty good room for all God's children. Because when love is the way, we actually treat each other well, like we are actually family. When love is the way, we know that God is the source of us all, and that we are brothers and sisters, children of God. God's commandment to love one another is still standing. And while it may seem that there are only a few here, well, it seems like sometimes it's hopeless. The change in the world can start in only one place, and that's start in us. And I'll be the first to tell you, and I have my divine love and critic right here to tell you, I do not always live up to the commandment to love, but it stands as our goal, what we have to continually try to do from each day forward to live more deeply into God's love and to make it our way of life so that eventually it could become the world's way as well. Amen.